OFAC. What is it? What is the Office of Foreign Asset Control? To get into more of today's topic, we've got Annie, who's done all of her research on this OFAC list and exactly how it applies. And before we get to Annie to give us all this knowledge, I will tell you that I experienced this list as an account executive for a mortgage lender back in 2001. So I'm an AE, 9/11 happens in 2001. And we immediately get a list that was emailed to us that said, every single applicant now, you have to run it by this list. And so I literally stared at this list of names and I was like, what in the world did I just get? Right. And I had no training on it because it was kind of a brand new thing for us to be doing, was to be bouncing names off this list. And back then you didn't have, our credit report wasn't pulling the OFAC list. It was just straight up a list that they sent to my email. Wow. And it was wild.
Yeah, that is wild.
Yeah.
Times they haven't changed, Ken.
Right. Yeah. And I looked at, so I read the list. I mean, it was a big list. I didn't read all the names on it, but we were, as an AE, as the loans came in, we were required to go over this list. And around that same time, one of my favorite musicians and probably one of the best musicians, singer-songwriters of all time, Cat Stevens, was kicked off an airplane that was flying to the U.S. because his name showed up on the no-fly list.
Oh, bummer.
And at that point, it was like, well, if we're going to make a list of names, we should probably be super accurate in who we want on that list and who we don't, because it could limit you from being able to, in that case, fly. But in these cases that we deal with, get a mortgage.
Right.
And so they came up with a list of names, and they do this kind of constantly. They're updating this list. And so, Annie, walk us through a little bit more about what this thing is.
Yeah, walking through. Yeah, OFAC today and other exclusionary lists. I want to be clear, OFAC's not the only one. It's
right.
just, OFAC's the big one.
Right.
You know, and when the first place that you're going to see this, hopefully, I mean, I hope your systems are up to par on this, is
right.
that it's on your credit report.
Yeah.
That's how important it is.
Yeah.
They put it there with all of your other information that tells us whether or not we can give you a loan.
Yeah.
So it's usually the last page. Keep reading. If you haven't seen it, just keep going. Keep reading that credit report. It's in there.
Well, and this is kind of an interesting thing, because as people go to take their pre-licensing classes through us, and then they go to take their test, one of the confusing things that you may or may not see on the test, the federal test, is which of the following would a loan officer have to do, right? And not that this is a real question, but it could be a real question. But one of the questions, one of the answers was check every one of their borrowers against a list of known terrorists. And I remember going, oh, yeah, we do that. But like a lot of loan officers might not know that because they don't understand that you actually do that. And the reason you'll understand is it's just done for you, right?
Yeah.
The credit report gets pulled, comes back with an OFAC hit or, not a hit.
Yeah. It's a little more complicated than that. Ish.
That's why Annie's
It's a little
here.
gray area.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's what we're going to talk about today. So OFAC, what is it? It's the Office of Foreign Asset Control, established in 1950. The primary mission of OFAC is to administer and enforce economic sanctions against targeted foreign countries and regimes, terrorists and terrorist organizations, weapons of mass destruction, proliferators. That's where I got
proliferators.
I wanted to say proliferations
I've never
too.
even heard that.
Yeah, narcotic traffickers and others in furtherance of U.S. national security, foreign policy, and economic objectives. Wartime is when you start seeing major changes to these lists, because that's when these activities go up, and our country wants to lock it down and say, you know what, we don't want money coming and going. We don't want goods or services coming and going, because we don't want this to lead to something worse.
Right.
And so for the sake of our conversation today, we're going to focus on the mortgage side of it. The OFAC comes up a lot within the transaction side of things, when you have wire transfers coming and going. And really the only time I've ever dealt with that on the mortgage side is when I'm looking over bank statements. And we've actually had to report fraud cases, because we're like, they've got a lot of money coming and going to these countries that have active sanctions. And we can't use that money. Right. And it's important. So you should be looking over bank statements. If you haven't been, this is another reason why OFAC kind of plays in. But the bigger part being that your borrower and anybody associated with these loans is not also associated with these sanctioned countries.
Right. So these things happen. I mean, it's kind of a timely class we're doing right now. You actually may see hits on this list now that you didn't see before, because what they do is the U.S. government goes in and says, we're going to, establish sanctions against this person or this group. They go in and add them to these lists and go, they can't finance anymore or they can't purchase anymore from us. It's up to the mortgage industry to actually execute on that, right? The mortgage industry has to go, okay, so we're not allowed to do loans for people that you've decided can't get loans anymore. We now have to do that. And there are cases of multiple banks and financial institutions and shipping companies that we just saw who have not actually, gone to the list to find out, are these people prohibited from purchasing U.S. goods or buying in the United States? They didn't look at the list, and now these people have not been sanctioned because we didn't do it right. So it is important that you focus on this.
Yeah. And I think a good way to start off is what happens when you do get a hit on the credit report.
Let's take a look.